Basis of everything that Antiochus Epiphanes set out to achieve. What did Antiochus want to do? He actually did it. He enforced a cessation of observance of religion other than the Greek ideology. In other words, his thought was, if we don't kill the Jews, no, not at all, we don't kill them. We just stop them from practicing Judaism. And then in 2 generations, it'll be forgotten. It'll be gone. Didn't happen. Today, what are we, 20 generations later? A new baby walks in, a Jewish baby. It doesn't walk in, but is carried in. And it shows that, thank God, we remain strong. And I don't know if anyone here knows this, but the actual story of Hanukkah is not found anywhere in the Bible. It's actually found in the book of Maccabees. That book was rejected by the rabbis who redacted the Jewish Bible. They left it out. The church chopped it and put it in theirs, but well, that's another story. So you probably didn't study when you were in Hebrew school. You probably didn't study the real story about Hanukkah. So I want to give you a little bit of an overview. And we go back to 163 BCE. The Maccabee army defeated the Syrian Greeks, the Seleucid Empire, who had tried to abolish Jewish religious practices. And in so doing, they defiled the Holy Temple. The Maccabees restored the temple, and they instituted the festival of Hanukkah as a substitute for the 8-day holiday of Sukkot, which occurred 2 months earlier, and which they couldn't fully observe because of the religious restrictions. That's where you get the 8 days of Hanukkah as 8 days of Sukkot, including Shmini Atzeret. And that's written, by the way, in the book of Maccabees. Didn't make that up here. It's not a conservative thing, in case anybody's worried. It's not a conservative thing. But 230 years later, there was no temple. It was destroyed by the Romans. So the rabbis now had a dilemma. And they decided to rebrand the meaning of Hanukkah to fit with their own theology. Hanukkah would no longer be about military victory. Hanukkah was now going to be about God's miracles. And to make that aspect of the holiday perfectly clear, they gave us this very famous story of the jar of oil miraculously lasting for 8 days. And if you're surprised at anything I've said so far, listen to this. The story of the jar of oil first appeared 600 years after the Maccabee story. 600 years. It first appears in the Talmud. And it was that very story, that fairy tale, if you will, which has inspired the Jewish people, especially in troubled and difficult times, to continue to rely on God and his miracles through today. Simply put, on a theological level, the story of the oil served the rabbi's purpose far better than the stories told in the book of Maccabees about military victories in the Hasmonean dynasty. This theological view is reflected in our liturgy. The Haftarah that was so beautifully chanted by Billy this morning contains that famous verse, not by might, not by power, but by spirit alone shall we live in peace. So why did the rabbis choose this particular Haftarah? Again, because it minimizes a great military victory and instead maximizes God's role in the story and the miracles that he still performs for us today. Second, you notice we said this morning, and we're going to say it in a few minutes in Musaf, we're going to say the Al Anissim. The Al Anissim prayer is added to each of the Amidas and to your grace after meals on Hanukkah. Although it mentions Matityahu, it makes no mention of his military victories. As the name Al-Anissim implies, Al-Anissim means, by the way, all the miracles. Al-Anissim implies that it was all brought about by God. Al-Anissim tells us in every generation God appears to save us from those who seek to destroy us. And as I said, over the centuries, that was the story which inspired us. And to a great extent, it still does. But in recent years, another aspect of this story, an ancient yet modern aspect of that story, has been serving to inspire us as well. And it's more important today, I think, than ever before. What is that story? It's that despite Hanukkah is the only time we fought an ideological war. It's the first time in history, 163 BCE was the first time anybody had fought for an ideological belief. To preserve our freedom to practice Judaism. So Hanukkah is also the holiday of Zionism. Hanukkah teaches us that even though we have been and still are a very small minority, we can and we will still survive. And it was this particular message, the victory of a few, v'rabim biyad ma'atim, we say, again, the few against the many, and the weak against the strong, that gave anti-Zionists and settlers of Israel, as still it does today in Israel, the hope, hatikva, that they too would establish a home where all Jews can live and worship as Jews. And that is why, when it came to Hanukkah, there was nothing more important to those and early Zionists than to declare that there was no miracle of oil. Well, how would that make sense? Well, I don't know if anybody of you know this, but there was an early popular Zionist Hanukkah song. It was called Anu Nosim Lapidim, which literally means we carry torches. And the lyrics, these are the lyrics by the early Zionists. No miracle befell us, no cruse of oil found us. We quarried rock until we bled, and then there was light. Now this song tells us that if we build the land, we build the land, not God, but we build the land, God would be the one, God would not be the one who created the miracle, but it would be the people. And thus, for early Zionists settling the land of Israel, it was their hard work and their sweat and their blood and their tears, and not God, that created the miracle of the state of Israel. No story of a jar of oil or the Maccabees appeared anywhere for the early Zionists. But then there is another famous Zionist song that the Maccabees do appear, which I'm sure you know. You all know this one. Mi yimalel kvorot Yisrael otan, mi yimane hein bechaldo yakum hagibo goel ha'am. Who can retell the things that befell us? Who can count them? In every age a hero or sage came to our aid. And then it goes on. Shma bayamim ha'im bazman hazeh. Hark, in days of yore in Israel's ancient land, brave Maccabees led the faithful land. But now all Israel must, as one, arise, redeem itself through the deed and sacrifice. So when you think about it, who is the hero of this song? The hero of Hanukkah is not the Maccabees of Judah HaMaccabee in 163 BCE, but the Maccabees of the early 20th century who rose up to save the people and the land of Israel along with those through today who keep that land safe. Al-Chayalim, Al-Chayalot, Al-Anshei Bitachon. Those are our Maccabees. And there is no mention of oil in this song. And did you also notice that there is no mention of God either? There's more. Did you recognize the word Shema? I said, Shema bayamim ha'em bazman hazeh. That word Shema at the beginning of the second stanza, that word Shema is not the Shema Yisrael that we say in our liturgy and where we proclaim our belief in God, or in one God. Rather, in this song, the Shema is a call to action as we again recall the heroism and the ancient Maccabees, again, as well as those who defend the land and the people of Israel today. So, what is the real story and the message of Hanukkah? What is the true Hanukkah miracle? Is it a jar of oil that lasted 8 days? Or is it a military victory? And what is the answer to those who think Hanukkah is nothing more than a Jewish Christmas? I'd like to share with you this answer written by Jake Novak. Jake Novak was the former spokesperson for the Israeli consulate in New York City. And he writes, "The history and lessons of this holiday are coming at just the right time. So we have to ask, in light of the Hamas massacre against Israeli civilians, the massive outpouring of global anti-Semitism it has set off, could there be a holiday more important to discuss than this? I don't think so." He goes on to say, "Just as it was about 2,200 years ago, Jews have relatively recently just re-established sovereignty in our homeland in Israel. 76 years, that's not a long time in the grand scheme of things. And just like the Maccabees, Israel overcame overwhelming military odds to win that sovereignty." So the key here is to remember, as he goes on to say, the key here is to remember that Hanukkah is more than just a Jewish holiday where we celebrate by eating latkes and donuts. We must remind everyone that Hanukkah stands as enduring proof that Jews and the land of Israel are inseparable, and that thousands of years of religious and secular history show us that without Jewish sovereignty in Israel, Jews cannot live any degree of enduring security or freedom anywhere in the world. In other words, my friends, Hanukkah affirms the Zionist message that the Jewish people lived in the land of Israel over 2,000 years ago, are indigenous to the land of Israel as our national homeland, and are not recent European colonizers. And for a touch of irony, as Novak also writes, keep this in mind, when the inevitable cavalcade of politicians and celebrities post Hanukkah greetings on social media and everywhere else this week, many of these famous folks and leaders have also shown themselves to be viciously anti-Zionist and are simply too stupid or dishonest to realize that by saying they wish us a happy Hanukkah, they are also wishing for all Jews to celebrate Zionism. Want an example? Very simple. Just last year, Rashida Tlaib, she tweeted, "Happy Hanukkah message. I'd like to wish my Jewish neighbors a very happy Hanukkah. Hanukkah inspires me, especially during this difficult time, and I hope that we can all remember that even in the most unexpected moments, miracles happen." Miss Tlaib, this is my message for her. If you ever wished a Jew happy Hanukkah, you have literally acknowledged Jewish rights, Jewish history, and the Jewish origins of the land of Israel, and congratulated us for decolonizing it. I guess we won't expect one this year. I doubt whether we'll have one this year. Sadly, however, as Jake Novak also reminds us, there are still Jews today who, like the ancient Hellenists, reject their Jewish heritage and the essential role that Zionism plays in that heritage and religious practice. And at the same time, when those small number of anti-Jews like the Jewish Voice for Peace, Truah, if not now, the Neturei Karta, who make up barely 1% of the Jewish population overall, tried to publicly celebrate Hanukkah this year, we should call them out for their ignorance and their hypocrisy. And while it just seems like they're a larger group because of our modern day platforms of social media, one often amplifies the voices of those who don't actually have much support or numbers in a real life. The danger they create for their fellow Jews all over the world with their ignorance and their hypocrisy is no joke. So, I'll ask you again, what is the true story and message of Hanukkah? Is it a jar of oil that lasted 8 days, or is it military victory? I'll answer it with this little story. When Menachem Begin, alav shalom, was asked, after the attack on the Iraqi nuclear reactor in Osirak in 1981, whether the success of the mission was due to God or to the skill of the pilots, he said, or he responded, "Thank God we have pilots like that." Shabbat Shalom and Chag Urim Sameach.